Welcome back, everyone. I'm Pastor Clayton Sellers. I'm the Associate Pastor at Faith Lutheran Church and Preschool in Collierville, Tennessee, a suburb of Memphis. I'm joined today by Pastor Adam Ray for another conversation about this past year of COVID-19 and the pandemic, the response of the church, how we've done things for worship, how we think about the life of the church moving forward, and what that might mean in a local congregation, but also for the Christian church at large. So I'm really glad to be joined today by Pastor Adam Ray. Pastor Adam Ray, why don't you tell us something about yourself, and we'll get started talking.
Something about myself. Let's see. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan.
Okay.
That's something about myself.
Wait, hold on. This is an important deal. You're a Green Bay Packer fan, but where are you from?
I am from the south suburbs of Chicago. So it's a little unusual. I get a lot of grief about it. So,
Okay.
but that's how I was raised. I was raised as a Packers fan. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm here in Decatur, Illinois. I'm the
All right.
senior pastor here at St. John's Lutheran Church, and I've been here for a little over 7 years. It's my first call.
Okay.
And interesting fact, I also vicared at this congregation.
Wow. Okay.
And so that's a little unusual to get that call back to your vicarage congregation. So I came here in 2013 as the associate pastor.
Okay.
And then when my previous senior pastor, when he retired, I was moved into that senior role back in, that would have been 2016, I believe.
Okay.
And so, I've been in that senior pastor role here for a few years. And I am married to my wife, Amanda. We've been married since 2009. And so I've been married for, seems crazy how fast it goes, right? So I have 2 kids. My daughter, Kaylee, she's 5. And then my son, Mateo, he will be 2 in May.
Is he already going to be 2?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You know how fast it goes with the kids. So, but that's a little bit about me and where we're at here. Been, like I said, serving here for over 7 years. So
now, just real quick, a note for everyone watching. Adam and I were seminary classmates together. We took Greek and like some of the other folks we've conversed with, Adam and I were on the same track. So basically every class that we could take, we took together. And maybe more importantly, we played baseball together. That's how we met on the seminary baseball team. A few weeks before classes even began, we were playing baseball out there on the fields at the seminary campus.
Yeah, you were one of the first guys I met at seminary. And that was one of the first relationships was meeting you through baseball and stuff. So
yeah. So I just say that for background for how long Adam and I have known each other. Now tell us a little bit. So we've been in this pandemic and the response to the pandemic for a year. Tell us how being the vicar, tell us what a vicar is. Okay. But how does this amount of time that you've spent with this particular congregation, how does that shape how you go about pastoring a congregation in such a situation?
First, a vicar is essentially an intern, right? So that was, we spend at the seminary our 3rd year is our internship year. And so that's when we do our vicarage. And so I was assigned to be a vicar here for that year of internship. And so, throughout that time, it's just a lot of learning by fire and trial and error and all that stuff. So, spent that year here. So I had that year under my belt in addition to the time I've been here as a called pastor. And so, I would certainly say, and even in some of your other conversations, you've seen a variety of the pastors in terms of how long they've been at a church when they then entered into this pandemic. And I would certainly say having those years under your belt to just have a better understanding of your congregation's dynamics, demographics, the culture. Those things are huge when you're trying to work through something like we've had to work through. And so I feel very fortunate and blessed that I had such a good feel and knowledge of who I'm working with, what the culture's like, and that kind of thing. And I feel for those pastors that either had just gotten into their calls, or some pastors that even took a new call in the middle of the pandemic. Those additional challenges are something that I'm thankful I didn't have to face that. But at the same time, some of the trouble with that is that people have come to experience you in one way throughout those years, and this has pushed everyone to lead in a different way, I think, think in a different way.
Mhm.
And so I think that's also a little bit of a challenge, is that people, they grow accustomed to sort of how things were
Mhm.
under your shepherding. And then when this happens, everything sort of changes with that. And so,
Right.
there's a little bit of a challenge that comes with that, I guess. So,
Yeah. What were some of those you mentioned, you know the culture and the dynamics fairly well. What were
sure.
some of those cultural things for your congregation and those dynamics that you were wrestling not wrestling with, taking into consideration in those especially those first days and weeks of the pandemic?
I mean, one of the most important parts was just the dynamic of the leadership team.
Mhm.
I think that was, the pandemic forced, I think, every congregation to reevaluate how they were leading,
Mhm.
how they were making decisions, what kind of meetings you were having,
Mhm.
and who's involved in those conversations. And so that was a huge thing for me, is to really have those established relationships with those people in leadership positions, that have a feel of sort of their style of leadership,
Mhm.
also just maybe the way they would think through things. So
Mhm.
you have people that are more linear, you have people that are more big picture, and
Right.
so being able to really have that knowledge to piece together the appropriate members and team to work through this kind of situation. So
Yeah.
I mean, so that was huge.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we've found throughout this situation is that we've established a core team that we meet every Monday via Zoom, which is
Oh,
a new thing when this
yeah.
pandemic started. And so every Monday I meet on Zoom with my executive director, the
Okay.
assistant executive director, and then our head elder. And every
Okay.
Monday.
Mm.
Every Monday we get together and we touch base on some key things,
Mhm.
in terms of worship, in terms of pandemic guidelines, in terms of finances,
Mhm.
and so that was something new that we started. But again, having those established relationships and stuff already made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, real quick, that Monday meeting with
yeah,
the I'll call it the executive leadership.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, um, do you think that'll be something you keep after the pandemic? Do you think that'll be something you'll keep moving forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's one of those things where we haven't settled on that yet in terms of what exactly that looks like.
Hmm.
I do think we've realized the benefit of having more regular touch bases,
Mm.
and so that's certainly something that we've learned along the way. Is that every church struggles with. First of all, you have leadership teams that are built of volunteers for the
Hmm.
most. And all of those volunteer teams, you have groups that meet maybe monthly, and then
Right.
you have other core groups that maybe only get together in a bigger format, maybe quarterly.
Hmm.
And then you look at your voters and how often are they getting together.
Yeah.
And what happens in churches is that often you're really not getting together or having conversations enough to
Mm.
make the progress you really need to make. And
Right.
that's a challenge, because a lot of our volunteers have full-time jobs and
Hmm.
families of their own, and and so it's a challenge to make that work. And I'm not a huge fan of meetings. I
Right.
don't want extra meetings either.
Yeah.
But what we have found is that having that sort of executive leadership team, having more regular touch bases, has definitely helped with communication.
Mm.
It's helped with, I think, staying ahead of issues rather than just being
Uh-huh.
reactionary.
Hmm.
And that's always a difficult thing, is to be just reactionary. So trying to stay on top of things and ahead
Sure.
of them has
Sure.
been beneficial. So I think at the very least, we want to continue with at least a monthly touch base with that executive team, but
Mhm.
probably even more often than that.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah. What you were describing in terms of like some groups getting together more often than others, I
yeah,
often call that things happen. They move at the church at the speed of church,
right,
um,
yeah, right,
because there's just these monthly meetings that take place,
right,
and not a lot doesn't always get done in between those.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I'm curious about the so we've talked to a soul pastor. We've talked to a couple of soul pastors. I'm an associate pastor, so I've been sprinkling in some things about being an associate pastor. You're the first senior pastor, or I guess you call you're a lead pastor there
sure, yeah.
at St. John's in Decatur. Uh, I'm curious about the dynamics and the role of a senior pastor, a lead pastor, uh, in this time. So if you would just just give us an idea of the staff that
Mhm.
that you're a part of there, and how you've understood your role as senior pastor, lead pastor in this past year.
Sure. Yeah. So our staff dynamic in terms of ministry staff, we have me, and
Mhm.
then we have an associate pastor,
Okay.
and we have a DC, a director of Christian education, and so those are our three called staff
Mhm.
members. Then we also have other staff. We have a worship team and choir director.
Mhm.
We have a full time secretary on staff. We have a part time financial secretary, and we
Mhm.
have a custodian.
Okay.
And so, in terms of the called staff, the biggest challenge for us was that back in, I think it would have been going into 2018, is when we had just gotten really moving with getting an associate pastor.
Mhm.
Because when I moved into the lead senior role, I went for a year by myself, which
Oh,
wasn't the plan, but that's how it came. It's
Sure.
just one of those things. So I went for a year by myself, and then we got our associate pastor, Pastor John, and then
Mhm.
we also got our DCE at the same time. And
Okay.
so we have a very fresh dynamic in terms
Yeah.
of just our ministry team, and we're all younger.
Mhm.
I'm 33,
Mhm.
and we're all 33 or younger,
Yeah.
and so a younger staff, and really still working on building that dynamic and that relationship.
Mm.
And I really felt like one of the things that's been hardest for us is that we were just really getting, I think, in a groove in
Mm.
terms of getting to know each other, and
Uh-huh.
really getting on board with vision and plan and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And then this all happened. And
Okay.
so we have really felt like not only, a lot of people say, well, we have to revisit issues. Yes, that's
Mhm.
true. But I think even more than that, we've been feeling like we have to sort of just restart
Mm.
in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
A lot of things we were trying to do and trying to move forward with, it's not just revisiting those things, it's really restarting them, because we had turnover along the way in some leadership. We've had
Mhm.
families that dynamics have changed. They move
Yeah.
from one category to another and all those things. And
Yeah.
so I think that's been a challenge for our staff, to just feel like we were really getting some momentum, and then to just have it like run into a brick wall.
Sure.
And so I think in my role especially, it's been trying to sort of that idea of lead pastor. So how do I lead the staff through
Mm.
this?
Mhm.
I think a lot of the things we've been thinking about is, what can we do in the midst of
Oh.
this?
Mhm.
Especially here in Illinois, it has been one of the tighter restricted
Sure.
states.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think about the situation and the problems with, what can we not do? What are we told we can't do?
Mhm.
And so trying to sort of reframe our ministry mindset to say, what can we do?
Mm.
And so what can we do, and then can we do it well? That's the other
Okay.
piece.
Yeah.
We're even shorter on resources and
Mhm.
things like that than normal. You can't plug into the same people you normally would.
Right.
And so, can we do it well? And so, I think at one point I remember talking with my DCE, Melinda is her
Mhm.
name, and that's been such a struggle for youth ministry people, that
Mhm.
I just, oh man, my heart goes out to people within youth ministry, because so much of what they do is relational
Yeah.
and activity based, and getting people together.
Right.
And so they have just been so hard pressed to keep something going. And
Mhm.
so, but I remember talking with Melinda at one point. This is probably back in the summer of 2020, where I just said, Melinda, in a lot of ways, it might not feel right that we're not doing so many
Mhm.
things, but we just have to do what we can. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, that's what it comes down to, is
Yeah.
there's so many things we're not able to do, and that's hard, and that's
Mhm.
frustrating, and it almost makes you feel like you're not doing your job.
Right.
But we have to just focus on what we can do,
Mhm.
and it's just, that's been a challenge. And I think
Yeah.
that's been difficult for people within ministry to sort of wrestle with that dynamic. So
Sure. What are some of those things that you've come down to be able to say, we can do this and do it well. We can do this and do it well. We can, and I don't
yeah,
expect the list is going to be terribly long,
right.
uh, but what are some of those things that St. John's is getting back into?
Well, yeah, getting back into, I mean, so we were on back when it all started in March. I think it was March 15th. That was, I think, the first Sunday we went live stream only.
Oh, okay.
And at that point, it was literally my iPhone set
Oh,
up
uh-huh.
on a, set it up on a little podium that we
Yeah.
had and propped it up with a hymnal
Okay.
and went for it,
Yeah.
and thankfully we already had a Facebook page and
Oh, uh-huh.
things like that to go live on, but yeah, but that's all we had. We didn't
Yeah.
have live streaming stuff before that.
Mhm.
It was something that was on our vision, it was on our goals
Yeah.
to get that moving, and then this happened before we even got it close.
Yeah.
So yeah, we start off, we're live streaming through an iPhone, and then so we started to obviously move forward with getting different equipment and all that fun
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until June that we resumed in-person worship in
Oh,
some
really?
capacity,
Okay.
and so we went several weeks without any in-person worship,
Mm.
and so that was exceptionally challenging to
Mhm.
not have that opportunity. and
Yeah.
and and that, during that time, we were really trying to focus on just how do we still provide quality worship
Mhm.
opportunity for people,
Mhm.
even though we're only online. And that was
Yeah.
brand new for us to think about. We never had to think about that before.
Yeah.
So, and it, that had everything from sound issues to the picture quality to what
Yeah.
the music, how do we do music well? I mean, and it was just such a, like, every week there was something new to figure out.
Sure.
And so that was sort of that early focus, was just providing a quality worship, even though we're
Mhm.
only online. And once we started to get through that and we were back in person, then a lot of the focus was how do we do both? So,
Mm. Right. Right.
because we had just gotten into more of a groove for online, and now we had to figure out
Yeah.
how to do both things.
Yep.
And so that was a new challenge, and throughout that, we were still not having Bible study. We were
Mhm.
still not having youth group activities and
Yeah.
things like that. So our Christian ed, group and our DC, they were working on how do we provide quality interaction with those
Mm.
families still.
Mhm.
What can we do? Can we bring things to their home and leave it on their
Right.
doorstep? Things for them to participate in.
Uh-huh.
Can we go and do set up an Easter egg hunt in our youth families' yards, and so
Mm.
give them some kind of connection?
Right.
What kind of devotionals can we do on a weekly basis? And
Mhm.
just thinking through all those ways to still be connected.
Yeah.
um, and then once you start back up with in-person worship, but in a limited way,
Mhm.
now you have just an added dynamic of those people that are there, and how do we minister to them well, and what do we
Mhm.
offer them that are there, while still trying to offer quality things and different things for those
Right.
that aren't there.
Yeah.
And so obviously that it was very trying, and it still is trying to sort of work through how to offer quality opportunities for all
Mhm.
people. And I think our main focus has been, how can we what can we do to stay connected?
Mm.
How can we keep our people feeling connected, even when
Mhm.
for so long we were told we had to isolate?
Sure. Right.
So, and so just constantly thinking through that kind of question,
Mhm.
which, no, we haven't done things perfectly. We've dropped the ball on several things. I'm sure, a lot of things that, looking back now, we were like, well, we could have done that, but we
Right.
didn't. But that's just unfortunately sort of the way it goes.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, with that in mind, that there were things you could have done better, things you dropped the ball on.
Sure.
React to this. I've been thinking about and saying at different times in different places, that there probably wasn't a right or a wrong answer, but there
Okay.
was definitely a wrong way to go about it. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah. Um, I mean, I think I would agree initially,
Okay.
in terms of, certainly this was a very unique time for not just the church but our world.
Hmm.
And so, uh, this whole right or wrong thing has been very polarizing,
Right.
and unfortunately, I think one of the challenges that the church has faced is just how divisive it's become,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just the way we have felt sort of pitted against each other and pushed into different categories and things like that.
Hmm.
And so, in terms of right or wrong, yeah, there's, for the church, in a lot of ways, there wasn't necessarily a right or wrong as we tried to navigate what we could do. In what we could offer. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's certainly wrong ways to go about it. And I think what hopefully, and from the churches I'm connected to and the people I talk to, I think every church has just been trying to focus on, how do we continue to proclaim the gospel, right? Number one, but how do we continue to just minister to and support our people? And so there's no right or wrong in that necessarily. If you're asking that right question, I think that's the right question to be asking. How do we minister to our people? How do we support our people? And then you just gotta, you sort of gotta brainstorm, and you sort of have to pick some things and go for it. And a lot of it throughout this kind of situation, it really is trial and error. We did some things that we thought were great ideas that we either didn't get much input or impact from, or then there was things that we thought, well, we'll try it, but it probably isn't going to really make a difference, and people loved it. So it just
can you give examples of those? What was something you thought would be good that wasn't, and something you were like, oh wow, this turned out better than we thought, or was received better than we thought?
One thing that comes to mind is earlier on in this pandemic, we had come up with a survey for our congregation that we sent out, and put a lot of thought into that. And my DC was a big part of that too, of just trying to put out a survey to our congregation to say, what are your needs? How can we support you? How can we help? And then also asking, are there things that you're looking to do to help others, right? And we thought this would be a great way to better understand what our people need and how to help meet that need if we can. And we really didn't get a lot of feedback at all. For the most part, people said, we're doing fine. And it was more so they were looking at how they can help others, not that they needed anything necessarily from the church. And so it sort of reversed our I guess our approach and what we expected. And then we had people that said they were willing to do things that we didn't have anything for them to do. And so that was a little interesting. And then, something that we probably didn't expect much from, but, went very well, is like just little things. Like one time we did a sit down with me and my associate in the DCE, and we just did a time of like Q&A with us, very informal, very random, hey, get to know us better or whatever. And people loved it. And it was very, very engaging. And it was something that we didn't really have to put a lot of thought into, and we thought it would just be like, hey, maybe they'll like this. And people really liked it, so it's those kind of things that you're never quite sure what's going to come from it. But I think, again, it comes back to just, you got to try it. You got to go, come up with a plan and go for it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, so.
Now I want to take, I appreciate that I appreciate you sharing things, something that didn't work and something that you kind of just threw together that was very well received.
Sure.
You mentioned that early on you were using your iPhone for the service.
Yeah.
You're probably at least the third guy I've talked to who has basically said that those first couple of weeks were on my iPhone. What is it about the Lutheran understanding of Christian worship that makes pastors scramble to find the technology on their iPhone to stream a worship service? Because it could have been real easy for us, for you, for me, for pastors all over to say, taking the next 10 Sundays off. What is it about our Lutheran understanding of worship and your pastoral understanding that says, I'm using my iPhone and we're scrambling to make this be a thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it really comes down to the fact of just, twofold, that number one, this is a communal thing that, worship is, we try to instill this in our people in different ways, but often we think of this act of worship as a very individual kind of thing, right? And so but really it's this communal activity, it's this community thing, it's a corporate act of worship. We're worshiping as the body of Christ. And so I think when we were faced with this pandemic, it caused a lot of us to just, it's one thing that some churches didn't have live streaming prior to this. That's another, why are we behind on that stuff? I don't know, right? I mean, that's another topic. But when this happened, it made us realize, like, oh my gosh, we have to get the body together, right? The body needs to be able to come together to worship. And we believe this is not only important but necessary. This is the body of Christ needs this. They need to be able to come together around word and sacrament and be able to still participate in this thing that God has not only told us is good for us, but He's instructed us that we need to do it. So I think it's that understanding that, like, the body needs this. It's sort of like the healthy idea, keeping the body healthy. If they're not able to have this as a part of their health, this is not good for the body as a whole. So so I think it's that that communal idea, that what's necessary for the body, but also just the fact that we truly believe, teach, and confess that the Word of God, right, is going to do what it's promised to do. Right. And where do we find that? Especially, it's in that time of worship, right? It's where that word is proclaimed. So we want to make sure our people are still getting engaged by that word in that way, right? So I think that's why we scrambled to make it happen. So
I appreciate that it's a confession and a faith understanding that Isaiah talks about how God sends forth the rain and the snow to accomplish what He will, and so He sends His word out to accomplish what He will.
Sure.
Now, what did you ever go on? Did you have to worship online personally with you and your family? Was that something you were traveling for whatever and you had to worship from home or premiere? Did you have that experience?
So honestly, not for quite a while.
Okay.
Just the way that things worked out and scheduling and all that. But yeah, it has happened now at this point. By the point we're at now, there's been those opportunities where that has been a situation, and honestly, I hate it.
Okay. Well, what do you hate about it?
Right. I think for me, in that opportunity to worship in that way, it just, the struggle for me is that it just felt like this is second best. And situations present themselves where obviously that is the, I guess, best option, right? And we were forced into it being the best option throughout this in a lot of different ways. But in that moment for me, it just felt like this is okay, it's nice, it's good to have this, but it left you longing for, I guess, the best thing. And also it's just I think it's an issue of distractions and stuff too. That we all have this, even if you're in church. But the last thing you want is in that time of worship to have all these outside factors taking away from that time of hearing the word and being engaged with the word. And so obviously, when you're at home or wherever you are trying to live stream, you just have all these new additional factors that can interrupt that time, right? And that's just it just is what it is. But that's that's just a challenge, and especially with little kids, you work hard to sort of get them used to what it's like to be in church and to work through that process, and then you're at home trying to do church on your phone, and they're just like, what? What is
Right. I play games on this. I'm not supposed to sit and watch this. Right.
Why can't I turn on Sophia the First, or why can't I, why can't I play with this loud car over here while we're doing, and so it's just a whole different thing. So, but I think it's that idea that this is nice, this is good, but it's not the best thing, right? It's not the best opportunity to do this,
Yeah. So what do you think it's going to look like for St. John's, for churches in general moving forward? Because this is a refrain I'm starting to hear where when streaming was the only option, we were forced into it, as you said. We're glad to do it. We scrambled to do it because the Word of God is effective.
Right.
But now, there's some reflection of, using your phrase, second best. It's not quite the same, and it's kind of laden with distractions. What do you think it looks like for St. John's and for the church at large moving forward with streaming?
Yeah, so I mean, we have put ourselves in a place now where we have purchased different cameras and some equipment to actually be able to, I guess, I hate the term, but produce, church on Sunday in some sense. And so, that's something that we've definitely settled on, the fact that I mentioned earlier, we wanted to get to a point where we were able to offer that. And at that time, the thought was more along the lines of for those people that are our shut-ins, things
Mhm.
like that, to be able to actually see and be a part of worship on Sunday
Mhm.
mornings.
Mhm.
For those people that, yeah, maybe they are traveling or whatever, they're out of town, those kind of things, to still be able to have worship
Yeah.
available in that way. And then, there is that, I think in my mind, it is more of a small piece, but then there's that outreach opportunity.
Mm.
I think obviously in social media, things get shared and things get put out there, and that, it's another way for the word to engage new
Yeah.
people. And I think it's nice, especially in our, our culture and generation, for people to have an opportunity to sort of see what we're like and what we're about,
Mhm.
to feel more comfortable when they do come that first time.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's nice. I think that's
Right.
a benefit. So we still plan to live stream as we move forward.
Okay.
But I would say that, the more we talk about it and the more we think about it, is that we've sort of settled on that idea of like, hey, we're not looking to do this, ultimate best
Mm.
production on Sunday morning. It's
Mhm.
not going to be this, perfect everything, sound, picture, whatever,
Sure.
but we want to provide something that is a good quality and that
Mhm.
people can use to worship on
Mhm.
Sundays. But it's not again, it's not the main thing, and I don't feel like it's the best thing.
Okay.
So trying to encourage our people that, I think the time will come for our congregation members to say, hey, it's time to come back,
Mm.
and trying to be sensitive to what that looks like. And
Mhm.
obviously, understanding people have their own health concerns and higher risk categories and all that. But the best thing is still to be present physically in worship. That's still the best thing. And so how can we get there?
Mm.
That's what we're hoping to keep moving forward to.
Yeah. And I guess that ties in with what you were talking about earlier in terms of connection and that relationship and being together in the body. That all seems together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, and I think just that, even now, so here in Illinois, our worship right now, we're still at a capacity limitation. We were at about 25% capacity. That's moving up to about 50%, but that's still where we're at right now, is about
Mhm.
50% capacity. And we have social distance seating and things like that, where we don't have a greeting time where people are actually shaking hands. It's just more waving hello.
Mhm.
We don't have fellowship opportunities. And so even for those that are here in worship in person, they're
Mhm.
still missing those connecting opportunities that we would normally have, which you feel it. It's just it's very different, and it is, even that is not the best thing. We realize that even for those here in worship right now, we're still longing to get back to those things that I think are very important to our active worship on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's that challenge that's still there as
Yeah.
we're getting. I think we're making progress, obviously, with the vaccine rollout and all those
Yeah.
things, right? Illinois' numbers have been down on a fairly consistent basis
Mhm.
recently. Those are all positives, but there's still so many pieces that we're missing that we are longing to get back.
Yeah.
So yeah,
What what are some of those pieces, and why are those pieces so important? And I think this is going to help to illustrate some more about how we understand Christian worship and what happens on a Sunday morning. So what are
sure.
some of those pieces that are missing, and why are they so important?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've experienced within the pandemic guidelines and restrictions is that, again, we've been pushed to isolate, right?
Mm.
And it's for, obviously, good cause, good reason, in a lot of ways, but in terms of just how we as Lutheran Christians understand our life,
Mhm.
isolation is the last thing that we should be seeking,
Mhm.
and the last thing that we should think is good for us.
Mhm.
So it's been such a challenge and such a tension to be pushed to live in isolation.
Yeah.
But we are literally built and created for relationship and for
Mhm.
community. And so those pieces of worship on a Sunday morning that, maybe some people have never really thought about or they overlook, but the opportunity to shake hands, the
Mhm.
opportunity to talk after service, the
Mhm.
opportunity for people to stay around and then go get breakfast together,
Mhm.
or whatever, the opportunity for fellowship before Bible study. I mean,
Yeah.
all those pieces are so integral to what it is to just be
Mhm.
a Christian, right? That you're
Mhm.
there to be a part of the body, and you're there not to be isolated. You're there to be in fellowship. You're there to be a community. And so, those things have just, I think, been challenging for pastors. It's been a long time since I've been able to just shake someone's hand. Maybe every congregation has this, but you have some people in your church that are just huggers, and it's been a long time since we've been able to just embrace someone and hug them. And so I think those things that we often took for granted and didn't even think about, we are now realizing that those were important, and those were things that you talk about. Paul talks about this, about encouraging one another, building each other up, right? And those things happen in those places, right? That you are literally there to be spurring each other on, encouraging each other, building each other up, grieving with each other, having joy with each other. Those happen in a lot of those moments that we're really not able to offer right now. So that's been tough to just be a part of, but also to see the impact it's had on our people. So
it reminds me of Paul, 1 Corinthians 12, where he talks about the body members one of another built up together. We recognize that we're members of one body built up together in Christ. And so much of our history and life together in Christ is in that communal together. And while we're still members of the one body of Christ, it's hard when you have to be socially distanced and isolated and alone. That's such a hard thing to do.
And to not even see someone smile. I mean, it's just, it's those, those things that they impact you more than you realize. And especially in such a long-term kind of factor, it really, really weighs on you and changes so many dynamics about what you do on a regular basis. So it's been a challenge with that.
So tell me about how the pandemic has impacted your preaching and teaching.
So, what was interesting is that I think every pastor probably felt this in some way, is that early on, you think things happen within world events and stuff, or even local events, where a pastor feels hard pressed not to talk about it, right? And so obviously when the pandemic started, I remember that very first Sunday we went live from my iPhone. Again, everything was different. We had to sort of reevaluate everything we were doing that Sunday. And my sermon that Sunday was almost even more of a homily reflection, and it was really just focused on where we were and what was going on. And so there was definitely that period throughout the pandemic where I think I felt more of that need to be incorporating those realities of what people are feeling and experiencing and all that. But what's been interesting is that as it's gone on, I think, at least for me, but I feel like for other people too, you get to the point where you just don't want to hear anything more about it. And I think, it's a good opportunity for us as pastors, at least, to think, what are we supposed to be preaching and teaching, and what are we focused on? And at the end of the day, we're not preaching on the pandemic. We're preaching on Jesus, right? We're preaching on what he's done for us and who he is for us, and how that impacts our lives certainly connects to things with the pandemic, of course. But at the end of the day, on Sundays and whenever we're preaching to our congregations, we're there to preach Jesus. And so I definitely found myself slowly but surely moving away from, feeling the need to incorporate everything about the pandemic, and just really getting back to just preach Jesus, right? And those opportunities present themselves to incorporate, world events or what have you. But you don't want to become just where every Sunday sounds like it's just another word about what's going on in the pandemic. People just need the gospel. They need to know that their sins are forgiven. They need to know who God is, even in the midst of whatever's going on in their life, right? And so just trying to focus more on that as things have progressed. So
as complication went up, the gospel became easier to proclaim. Is that a fair reflection?
Yeah. So, I've been thinking about this. I've watched a few other of the conversations you've had and stuff, and thinking about that reality. And I think what was very interesting for the church and for pastors is that So the pandemic, what do you do with it? How do we preach it? How do we talk about it? What does it look like? And yeah, it's like some of the other things that have happened on a more of a national level, right? Where in the very beginning, I think the pandemic creates a great opportunity for people to hear the gospel that normally would have just not been interested, right? So the pandemic brings about this true sense of our mortality,
Yeah.
this sense of how things really are out of our control, how we all the things we take for granted are suddenly brought to light, and so it all of a sudden makes the gospel very fresh to people, and it makes them a little more willing and eager to hear it. And so you have that initial time where you're just like, hey, people are really, they're ready to hear this, right? They're ready to hear the gospel. Nothing about the gospel changes, and that's what's so amazing about it, is that nothing about the gospel changes. It's still the same thing.
Yeah.
But, all of a sudden people are just a little more in tune or looking to hear it. And then sure enough, as things go on, we sort of settle back into the, same ways and the same thoughts and all that. And, you find people putting their hope in all these other things again, whether it's new leadership or new plans or a vaccine or whatever. And, before you know it, you're right back to feeling like, people are sort of desensitized themselves to the gospel again. But the whole time, the gospel remains, and we keep proclaiming the same thing. And so it's just an interesting dynamic I think for pastors to experience and to walk through. And I think you have to remind yourself as a pastor that what I'm doing really doesn't change, but things around us are constantly changing. And so that's an interesting thing to experience for sure.
Did you pick up any new ways of engaging with your people? So we talked about the connection of worship. We haven't been able to hug anybody or shake anybody's hand, or even get into those regular gatherings, the midweek Bible studies, the Sunday morning breakfast, the Saturday morning breakfast. Did you do anything to, I guess, engage more with the members of your congregation?
I mean, we certainly did more in terms of just our online presence, especially more early on when we were literally not doing anything in person, so we were trying to offer more online Bible study opportunities, just weekly devotional thought, things like that. So we were doing a lot more of that early on. But, what's been, I think, very challenging for ministry staff, is, and not everyone realizes this, but, throughout this pandemic, I think we're just tired. And I have found that throughout this year, it's been, I'd call it a different kind of stress, so it's not a stress of just being busy or having a lot on your plate or what have you, but I would say there's definitely sort of a decision burnout, right? You're just burned out from having to make decisions and trying to navigate through this. I would say you're experiencing a tiredness in just such an emotional way, because you feel so restricted. You can't do the things you want to do. You're struggling to do the things you are doing. You look at your congregation and only about half are actively there, and you're trying to figure out how to stay connected to the other half. And I think it's just been very tiring. And so early on, it's like that. I think a lot of people almost felt a boost in energy, like, this is a new challenge. Like, let's
adrenaline hit.
Yeah. And you're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And like, I think everyone was sort of like boosted for a little while with that adrenaline, and then you crash. And all of a sudden you realize that, we're now a year into this, and you're just tired. You feel like you don't know how to initiate new things because you're just trying to keep the things going. I've always hated the terminology maintenance ministry, and that gets thrown around, and pastors get criticized, when they're
I think I know where you're going. So talk about the negative way that maintenance ministry gets used, and then go where you're going to go with it for being so tired. So what's the negative way maintenance
Okay,
ministry?
so yeah, so the negative way is that, pastor gets categorized into he only does what he has to do.
Mhm.
He sort of gets by with the bare bones kind of thing, and he's just, yeah, he preaches on Sunday and prepares worship. He leads a Bible study. He visits if someone really needs to visit, sort of, that's the end. He's just sort of maintaining what we already have existing. But if we want the church to grow, we need to do more than just maintain what we're doing. And that's unfortunate that some people get lumped into that unfairly and things like that, right? But in terms of this last year, especially, I think in a lot of ways we were sort of forced to just focus on maintaining, because so much had been stripped away and so much had been changed and restricted. A lot of what we're trying to do is just maintain
Mhm.
those key pieces of
Mhm.
what makes us the church.
Yeah.
And that, again, I sort of alluded to it earlier. I mean, that could often make you feel like, am I doing my job?
Mhm.
Am I doing enough? Should I be doing more?
Mhm.
And that's again, back to that being stressed and exhausted in a new
Yeah.
way. That has been very stressful and exhausting.
Mhm.
Because I've never felt like, I don't want to be just like a maintenance, ministry kind of idea. You want to be thinking of new things and leading towards new opportunities. But a lot of this situation, we've just sort of had to try to maintain what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's been such a new challenge to
Mhm.
walk through, that I think it's taken its toll on ministry people across the board. So
So if you don't mind, if you
yeah.
and I'm going to ask you to kind of share some personal stuff.
Mhm.
How have you coped with that tiredness? What have you been drawing on? What have you been drawing on spiritually, theologically, um,
Yeah.
personally to see you through this? As you continue to lead the staff and the congregation to ask what can we do and can we do it well? What have
Right.
you been drawing on through these months and into a year now?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I do see a counselor on a pretty regular basis, which,
Mhm.
I would just say that in terms of anyone in ministry of any sort, I mean, I think that's important. I have found that to be very helpful for me in my
Yeah.
ministry. But I think especially at times like this, it has felt often like, we've been on a bit of a roller coaster, and rather than the highs and lows, it's been like the lows and then the really lows, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
and so I think to have some kind of support system in
Mhm.
place, where someone can help speak truth into those moments,
Mhm.
and someone could also help keep you from sort of bottoming out,
Mhm.
but sort of keeping things at a place where are I guess more realistic and more attainable.
Mhm.
I think that's been very important.
Mhm.
Obviously, drawing on just my family and trying to take into consideration some of those blessings that we've had
Mhm.
of more time at home,
Yeah.
of more opportunities to just be with our children or our
Yeah.
spouses or
Right.
whatever. And sort of, drawing on some of that too, of
Mhm.
course, has been something you don't want to take that for granted. It's been a very unique opportunity.
Mhm.
I've had less meetings in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So I haven't been gone as much at night. And,
Right.
so those are the things that you try to draw from also.
Okay.
I think in terms of theologically, I think something I keep coming back to is just that, God is the God of the valleys, right? And
Mhm.
he's God in the valleys, he's God in the mountains,
Yeah.
and we talk at seminary about theology of the cross,
Mhm.
and I think this is a good picture, a good reality of what that's all about, right?
Yeah.
That Jesus remains, his promises remain, his faithfulness remains,
Mhm.
and so drawing from those realities that even in the low seasons, even in the difficult seasons, that
Mhm.
there are certain things that just remain the same. And so how do you draw from that, and how do you draw from that so that you can keep your eyes focused moving forward rather than
Sure.
just getting stuck where you are. So
Yeah.
but that's not easy. Yeah, I mean, it's been, like I said, it's been a very challenging year. It's been very
Mhm.
stressful, very
Mhm.
exhausting, and I still feel it. I
Mhm.
certainly still feel it. So
Yeah. Um, as have you, and again, I'm going to ask, kind of push you a little bit here.
Okay.
How have you helped your staff, the associate pastor, the DCE, the worship director, the secretary, the financial secretary, the janitor, those who kind of uh, fall under your leadership? How have you helped them or encouraged them to take care of themselves in this time that can be so tiring?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think a big part of that as any kind of leader is just being honest. I
Mhm,
mean, and maybe that sounds too simple, but
mhm,
I think if you are honest about just the fact of what you're feeling,
mhm.
it gives them a little bit more freedom and an opportunity to feel like they can be honest about how they're feeling.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so I think just trying to be honest, and trying to be real that, hey, this has been tough.
Mhm,
And I, almost that idea again of like, hey, I'm not here to set the bar so high that you have no chance to
mhm.
attain it. I understand this is a difficult time.
Yeah.
Again, let's ask, what can we do?
Mhm.
Trying to help them understand that I'm not here to put pressure on, like what we're not doing,
Yeah.
but how can we encourage each other to do what we are doing and do it well? And so I think, trying to just be honest, be real about it, and let them know that, I'm present. I'm here in
Mhm,
this with you. And
mhm.
so how can we be in it together? How
Yeah.
can we be in it together? And again, back to the isolation piece, can we still feel and remain a team throughout this process?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? So it's been interesting. I think it creates whole new staff dynamics and all that fun stuff.
Mhm. Now, I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share on how you've been coping
Sure.
and handling the tiredness. I very much appreciate that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in this past year? We've talked a lot about pastor, and we'll come back to it. But how has it been as husband and father
Mm.
during this time?
uh, Interesting, I
Yeah.
guess. It's and again, every family's been impacted in some shared ways, but also in unique ways.
Hmm.
And I think that's what's interesting about things like this is that so you find those shared ways you've been impacted, and you sort of rally around those and draw from
Uh-huh.
those things. But also every family's been impacted in unique ways. So I mentioned my 5-year-old and a almost 2-year-old, and
Yeah.
so being able to be home more with them and that
Mhm.
they've been home and things like that has been a great blessing in so many ways. And just trying to, it's like, I think as a parent, especially, how do we maintain some kind of normalcy in the
Mhm.
midst of things that are so abnormal?
Yeah.
How can we keep, at least within our home and within our family, how can we keep some sense of that normalcy, the
Mhm.
structure, the
Right.
support, right?
Right.
So that's definitely been a part of parenting that has been highlighted, when you feel like everything is so different and everything is just sort of a little out of control at some points.
Mhm.
How do you keep that in your home, at least to be able to keep that for your children?
Yeah.
As a husband, I think it's been especially challenging just because, for my wife, Amanda, she has not had her job throughout
Mhm.
this. They have not started up the program that she leads, hasn't resumed. And so she's been in a new place in life in terms of that.
Yeah.
And so trying to be a source of support and encouragement for her in the midst of
Mhm.
just life looking so different.
Yeah.
And you feel like there's so many things that you're missing out on,
Mm.
that it's like, well, how can we mourn those things together, but also how can we still look at those things we do have in the
Mhm.
midst of this? And so, it's like even little things, like for a while we were really mourning not being able to go to a park with the
Mhm.
kids,
Yeah.
not being able to take them to the zoo, not being able
Mhm.
to, and it's like, they're only little once, and
Yeah.
this is those opportunities that you long to have, and to
Uh-huh.
feel like those have been stripped away from you. That's hard,
Yeah.
and you have to mourn and grieve those things.
Mhm.
But what is it again? It's like the same kind of question. What can we do?
Yeah.
Um, what can we have? What do we have in front of us? And so just, yeah, I think constantly reevaluating and asking
Mhm.
that question. And
Mhm.
again, that is not easy. And
Right.
and you have your days or your weeks or whatever where you just you're sad,
Mhm.
and you feel like, man, life is just so different and I don't like it like this.
Mhm.
But then you sort of gotta like get back to, again, what do we have? What are
Yeah.
we blessed to have, and what can we do with the situation? So
Right.
it's definitely unique for every family, but certainly a lot of shared challenges
Yeah.
that we've all experienced.
What were what were some of those things, especially with the kids that you brought in and established? So, like for example, uh, my kids are. I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
Oh,
9 and 7, fourth grade and
okay.
second grade.
Yeah.
And so we did little things like unload the dishwasher. Well, unload the
Mm,
dishwasher in the morning after
okay.
breakfast. Load the dishwasher. We do a morning devotion uh, that we hadn't done before. We turn the TV off at a certain time in the morning. We don't turn the TV on until a certain time. We watch shows together as a family. We
Right.
do these sorts of things for dinner. Some of them we were doing a little bit, but then kind of doubled down
Right.
and made them to be more routine. So I'm curious, we couldn't go to the zoo, you couldn't go to a park, but what were some of those other things that you could do as a family with your kids to add in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, weather plays a factor in a lot of things too. But
Mhm.
we enjoy just taking family walks together.
Mm.
That's something that we enjoy doing. And then we all just love getting out of the house and doing that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so, it was funny how that normally that would have been something, yeah, we enjoy, we do it, but it really became like, oh man, it's nice out. Let's go for a walk, right? Let's
Mhm.
it's nice out. Let's get out of the house and
Yeah,
go out there together, and it just became such a bigger opportunity.
yeah.
But again, I think for us, it's been a lot of trying to just maintain some sort of structure and
Mm.
routine to
Mhm.
again help establish some kind of normalcy for the
Yeah.
kids and stuff. And so the little things of what morning breakfast looks like,
Mhm.
nighttime routines, having a very shared similar routine every night, with reading a story before bed, our prayer times and how we go about that,
Uh-huh.
those kind of things. And we actually not too long before the pandemic started, we had just moved into a different home,
Oh, okay.
and so we live right by the lake now. The lake is
Uh-huh.
right behind us, and so we have found a new thing for us has been that opportunity to just be out by the lake,
Uh-huh.
fishing, what have you. And
Yeah.
so like that's been a great blessing that we had. I think we had more time to just focus on those kind of things, being
Yeah.
outside by the lake, and again, you were sort of forced. We've always been a family that does things together, but
Okay.
you were forced to. That's it. You had to do
Yeah.
it together, which has been again a blessing to have more opportunity to do that. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, we have. I can't say that we've stuck to many things the whole time.
Yeah.
Things have sort of morphed and changed and
Yeah.
adapted. But focusing again on trying to create some kind of normalcy and
Yeah.
structure for them in the time where everything is so out of the norm.
Mhm. Mhm. I appreciate you sharing about your family life, Adam.
Mhm.
Going back to church life, things at St. John's. It's been a nearly universal experience of congregations that everything was brought to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
All the Saturday morning breakfasts, all the Bible studies, all the activities, vacation Bible school, egg hunts, youth trips, anything that would happen over the course of a year, all of that came to a screeching halt, wasn't done. Um, and now, as things are starting to change across the nation with the pandemic, how is how are you and St. John's and the leadership of St. John's? Uh, how are y'all evaluating what gets brought back and why?
Yeah.
What does that conversation sound like?
Yeah, so not long before the pandemic started, we had recently formed a new group at our church that's called the Safety and Security Team.
Okay.
And that really came about of more the mindset of just basics about the church campus
Mm.
and how we operate and are things safe, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So talking about just basics of the kinds of doors we have and fire drills and and having a team to help look at those things and just go over and evaluate that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so that group got started not long before the pandemic, and little
Mhm.
did they know, especially our leader of that group, Larry, little did he know what it would turn into. I mean,
Yeah.
my gosh, it's just been, and so they've sort of evolved into our COVID
Mm.
protocol procedures and all that
Oh,
group.
okay.
And so that's what they've heavily been focused on is, what are the guidelines that we're going to put into place? What kind of
Mhm.
restrictions do we have? Keeping up to date with what what Illinois is saying, what our
Mhm.
local county health department is saying, and so that's what they've just been
Mm.
entrenched in, and just, everything is going through them right now. And
Yeah.
so whenever we talk about, bringing something back or what have you, that's a conversation that we have is, we
Mm.
go through that group and we have that conversation, and we ask the question, what can we do?
Uh-huh.
And then what does that look like?
Yeah.
So we resumed Bible study probably about 6 weeks ago,
Okay.
in person. And so we had that conversation.
Mhm.
What can we do? What will it look like? We're right now working on trying to get Sunday school started again.
Okay.
Same thing, and the hardest part is that a lot of these things are just logistical nightmares.
Mm. Mhm.
It's the thought is easy,
Yep.
the plan in your head is easy, but then when you start going through those logistical steps of social distancing and capacity limits and
Right.
food, can there be food, can there be all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, this is just, now we're on step 22
Yeah.
of something that sounds like it should be so easy,
Yeah.
and things that previously took 2 or 3 steps to
Mhm.
plan, now. And so we've been very blessed to have that group to help
Mm.
support us in that. And right
Okay.
now, everything that we try to either bring back or start fresh, we have that conversation with that
I see.
group that helps us sort of think through those things. So
Okay. Okay. So you guys put a team in to sort of, not sort of, but you put a team in place for the congregation and for the leadership to say, we want to do this. These are the things to consider.
right, right,
But
yeah.
then,
How can we do it safely? That's
yeah.
what it comes down to. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um, are Has there been anything that has surprised you in the past year? I realize the pandemic was a surprise. It was unexpected. That's the
Right.
gift. But has there been anything that has surprised you, positive or negative, throughout this past year that you're like, upon further reflection, this thing has surprised me.
Yeah.
Just whatever that might be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things that has surprised me is just in terms of our congregation. Yeah, it's been a challenge, and there's been hiccups along the way, and there's been struggles, frustrations, all those, of course. But by and large, I mean, the congregation, the support of our
Mhm.
people, the encouragement, I would say the patience,
Mhm.
the willingness to, to sort of have to adapt and sacrifice. I
Yeah.
mean, overall, it's been incredible,
Mhm.
because, I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that every decision and every protocol or whatever is impacting our people,
Mhm.
and they again, shared things but also unique things. They have a lot of stressors that have come their way throughout this process, and so I've been very pleasantly surprised that, by and large, we have really had great support and great
Mm.
encouragement of our congregation, and
Mhm.
that's been a huge
Yeah.
positive. That going into it, that's constantly that concern and that fear, I guess, of like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like, how do we do this in a way where people will still uh, feel cared for,
Mhm.
but also still feel like it's something they could go along with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's back to that decision burnout. You just get so tired of having to try to make those decisions, but
Mhm.
having their support has been a huge blessing for
Yeah.
sure, and that's
Sure.
been great. So, um, negative. I mean, there's a long list of negative things, of
Yeah.
course.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Are they negative in the sense that they're detrimental, or are they negative in the fact that they weren't pleasant to go through?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean both. So I
Okay.
guess yeah, certainly things that weren't pleasant to go through, and not just learning curves and things like that, but
Yeah.
just difficult conversations,
Mhm.
different outcomes that were painful to experience, because it's not, you didn't want it to have to be that way, but
Yeah.
it just felt like it had to be. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's certainly that, but then yeah, also negative in the sense of just the, you know, for any pastor and stuff right now, I think we probably all are feeling in some way where, you look at your congregation and not, yeah, it's different than what it was, of course.
Yeah.
But I think there's that feeling and that concern of like, are there people, are members of our church where along the way, we've sort of lost them without yet realizing it.
Mm.
And when I say lost, I don't mean that in the sense of like, oh, they're lost sheep in the sense,
Sure.
where they've lost the faith or something to that extent. But in terms of just, people that were active members prior to this, that along the way, have they fallen out of those habits, routines, those things that they were a part of, that we've sort of have lost them, but we don't yet realize it.
Yeah.
When will we realize it?
Mhm.
And I guess what does it look like in that moment? And so right now, again, we're probably at about half of our active membership that is back in person at this point.
Yeah.
And so, that leaves a lot of question marks in some sense,
Yeah.
oh, what does that look like? When will we get people back? In terms of guidelines and protocol and all that. But also for some people, when will they feel safe? And for some people, will they get back into that healthy routine?
Yeah.
That's definitely a concern, and that's one of those negatives that you already feel it, but I guess you're worried that it could be even worse than you realize.
Sure. Sure. I think that's an important question for congregations, for pastors, for members of the congregation to be asking and thinking about, because the members will likely have a pulse of that as well as the pastors, and maybe
Oh yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
a
Right.
better pulse of it,
Right.
seeing folks in different places and in different ways. So I hope that you and the leadership and the membership at St. John's are able to keep wrestling with that question and ask it and keep an eye on that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
what I want you to kind of put your thinking ahead cap on here. What do you think? What do you think the church is? What do you think this is going to mean for the church in the long run? The whole past year of reacting and adjusting and changing things up and stopping things and trying to get restarted.
Yeah.
And before you say what does it look like, are you generally optimistic or pessimistic about things for the church, and I mean for your local congregation and for the church at large? Are you
Sure.
optimistic or pessimistic? And what do you think that looks like for the life of the church looks like moving forward?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say I feel like I'm always optimistic about the church, capital C, right?
Sure.
Like
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
in that sense, right? We know the outcome. We know that obviously, nothing's going to prevail against it, and so always optimistic of the church, capital C, in that sense. But in the lowercase c, the local church, our
Right.
physical congregations.
Mhm.
I think there's the positive that I hope comes out of this, where churches have been forced to look at pretty much everything they're doing and reevaluate it and to think through it. And yeah, some people will just sort of look at it and say, well, it's just that's what we're going to keep doing. Hey, you know what? I don't know. I don't know what works for every church. That's up to them to decide. But
Sure.
I think this has definitely forced us to rethink, what we're doing.
Mhm.
And that's in almost every sense of what we're doing, so and it helps you to see those things that are those pillar things that
Mhm.
are the no-brainers, that
Yeah.
yes, this is what we keep doing, and maybe even make you think about how do we do those things better. But
Mhm.
I think it also, if there's good that comes from all these things being stripped away, is that in that process, maybe you're able to realize the things that were stripped away that you don't need to have back.
Mhm.
And this is true for any kind of organization. I mean,
Yeah.
any kind of church, is that there's always those things that, maybe they should have already been stopped or ended, or maybe it already wasn't as fruitful as the resources you put into it are
Yeah.
worth, that kind of stuff. And so I think having those things stripped away is certainly a good time for us to, and I pray that every church is thinking about that.
Mm.
Do we need to bring everything back?
Mhm.
And what are the things that we have actually survived quite well without? And can we put those resources towards something that would be
Mm.
more beneficial or more needed within our congregation, our community. And so,
Yeah.
trying to think through that. That's why I said earlier, I don't think it's just revisiting things, it's restarting. And some
Mm-hmm.
things, when we look at that, I think there's some things we'll say, we're not going to restart.
Yeah.
And that's tough. But at the same time, this pandemic has almost afforded organizations the opportunity to do that, where people are more, I think, more acceptable than normal, right?
Yeah.
I think people are a little more willing to go ahead and go along with it, because they say, yeah, maybe we didn't really need that. Maybe that wasn't as beneficial. Maybe there are other opportunities. And so when I think, put on my future vision, long-term thinking cap, I hope and pray that that's a priority for congregations, and trying to remind myself to make that a priority for our church here is thinking through, do we need to do that again? And if we do, does it look the same? Why not? Right. And really trying to use this as an opportunity for those kind of important questions. Any kind of good vision planning and stuff, you're constantly reevaluating, what you're doing. You don't just put something in motion and then just let it ride forever. You're constantly coming back to it. But I mean, we all fall prey to this. I mean, you just, you set something in motion and you let it go. But this has definitely been a year where we've all had to stop and reevaluate. So
yeah. I appreciate that conscientious and deliberate reflection and thinking about what it is that what's happening in a local congregation. Why was it happening? Can we do it better? Again, those are good and fruitful questions to ask. And it might be, and I just want to throw this out there for anybody watching. It might be that the answer to the question is everything we were doing needs to be brought back, and that's great.
Great.
But maybe there can be improvement, or maybe one thing can be started up differently.
Sure.
Has there been any particular Bible verses or stories from the scriptures or theological topics that you've been thinking about that have really kind of guided the way you've been pastoring and leading and living in this time of a pandemic?
I mean, I can't say any like specific scripture verse or something like that. But one thing that has really stuck with me, and that, here just recently, I was on schedule to preach for the Transfiguration, so something about the Transfiguration account has just been sort of with me for the last several months, even prior to celebrating the Transfiguration. And it's just this idea that, what happens in the Transfiguration is that, Jesus leads his disciples back down the mountain into the valleys. And it is there that Jesus is doing his work, right? So yes, this amazing thing happens on that mountaintop, and it's incredible for the disciples, and obviously there's purpose and meaning and all that to what's happening there. But it's all so that Jesus is leading his disciples back into the valleys, right? He's doing his work in the midst of sinners, for sinners, with sinners, so I think for me it's been that idea of like, what, this certainly has not felt like a mountaintop kind of year, and that, every pastor, every minister, person, just every person in general, you go through these seasons of the mountains and the valleys and things like that. But thinking that, this is really what ministry is all about, is that Jesus leads us through the valleys. And so we've encountered that in a very unique and different way. But again, it brings us back to those realities of who Jesus is and where he's doing his work, and where he's leading us. He leads us through those valleys, right, to bring us ultimately to that true mountaintop, right? The resurrection that awaits us and the kingdom that awaits us. But life is a bit of a valley. And that's the reality of life, but it is Jesus that leads us through those valleys, that strengthens us, carries us, to bring us to the cross, to the empty grave, right, and ultimately to the resurrection. So yeah, I think that's definitely stuck with that hey, maybe we were blessed for a time to feel like we were really doing mountaintop kind of stuff,
Sure.
but is that really what ministry is?
Yeah.
No, it's not. That's it's really not what it is. But who's our God, right? And what is He doing, and how does He lead us? So trying to really reflect on that has been
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. As you were talking, it made me think of, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That 23rd Psalm comes to mind. Um, and I,
Yeah,
and I, and I think, and then you tied the cross in there, which, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. But it's almost as if going through the valley of death leads us to the mountain of the cross, right? And so it's there on Mount Calvary, where our Savior is crucified, that we see we've made it through, but our Savior hasn't, and He's going to be buried and resurrected, and that becomes our comfort in these low times and in these values.
yeah.
Adam,
When I and
go
when
ahead.
I preach on the transfiguration, it's sort of that kind of thought. That's what
Yeah.
I sort of was telling our congregation, that every Sunday, this is what God's doing, is He's leading us back up to the mountaintop,
Hmm.
where here we encounter Him, we see Him on the cross, we see the empty grave, we see
Yeah.
the promise of the resurrection. And worship is that mountaintop experience where God is revealing Himself to us. Here I
Uh-huh.
am. And then
Uh-huh.
what happens, right? He leads us back into the valleys, right? And this happens, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But that's just, yeah, again, that's sort of that, the Christian hope and promise of,
Mhm.
Jesus is that one leading us back to that cross, back to the empty grave, leading us through the valley to the resurrection. And so, trying to find comfort and solace in that reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Adam, I really appreciated your time and your honesty. I want to give you the opportunity to share anything you wished I had asked you about, anything that's been on your mind.
Sure.
Just a closing thought for us.
Yeah, I would just say this. If you haven't, anyone watching, if you haven't, I would say pray for your pastors.
Mhm.
And I say that in terms of just, the pastors I know and I talk to, and the shared struggle and the shared stress, and just again, back to just being tired and worn. Pray for your pastors, pray for your DCs, your ministry people, and even for those other nonprofits that are out there trying to do
Mhm.
ministry work. They've also been hit hard, and this has been such a struggle for them financially and things like that
Yeah.
as well. To keep those people, those leaders, those ministry people in your prayers. We certainly appreciate them, and we could certainly use them. And so I would just urge people to be thinking about that. And if you aren't currently, to add that to your prayer list. If you are, thank you. We certainly appreciate that. But they are very well needed. So
Yeah.
thank you, Clayton. Thanks for doing this, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a blessing to just sit and chat with you about this.
Yeah. Again, Pastor Adam Ray, thank you for your time. I pray for God's richest blessings on you and your whole ministry team there, and all the people at St. John's and Decatur. I thank you for your time and your honest reflections and sharing with us. I hope that everyone who watching this, I hope you were blessed and that you're edified and built up and encouraged for the life of the church, to know that Christ continues to work and that He is with us on the plains as we sing in that hymn. So again, thank you all for your time, and may God continue to provide His richest blessings on you.
God bless.